Adolescence is a time of profound change, physically, emotionally, and neurologically. Understanding these changes is crucial for educators, parents, and anyone involved in shaping young minds. Rachel, thank you ever so much for joining me on the International Classroom podcast today. Whereabouts in the world do we find you?
I'm in Gloucestershire in the UK.
Oh, nice little part. Whereabouts?
I'm sort of in between Stroud and Gloucester.
Obviously, the introduction there loosely paved our way into this. But the teenage brain as itself is something that for us as educators, I suppose for me, I don't really stop and really think about it in that much detail. I'm more concerned about, like, are they learning? Are they understanding? And it's quite a niche field to really go into.
Yeah.
What sparked your interest in that particular stage of development?
Well, I was thinking about this over the last sort of 24 hours and why I really care deeply about it. And actually, probably my interest in this area didn't really start with teenagers, but because I ended up in teaching completely by accident. And I trained in the British Army and I went to Sandhurst.
Wow.
And there's a huge emphasis during training on morale and maintenance of morale. And I think that subconsciously, when I was quite young, when I'm in my early 20s, highlighted to me the importance of being happy or having a positive outlook in productivity, being effective, and being good at what you do. So I think probably that was where it started. Before that, in my degree, I did quite a bit about the evolution of animal behaviour. So looking at, not really much in humans, in other species mainly, but looking at how behaviour evolves and social behaviour particularly evolves based on a scientific basis, if you like. So looking at the biology, the neurobiology and sociobiology of that. And then I became a teacher, and I worked in a very high achieving school, and there was a tremendous work ethic with students and with teachers, but I felt quite often that it came at the cost of happiness, and not always, but often. And that it was this idea that if I am successful, I will be happy. And if I keep pushing and work harder and do more and more, I will achieve this level of happiness with myself or with whatever else. And then actually at that same school, we had an inset a day, and there was a speaker called Bettina Honan came, and she did a lot of research into adolescent neurological development. And she sparked this interest in specifically looking at what is different about the teenage brain and how we tap into that increased productivity with understanding the brain of a teenager differently. So yeah, that is sort of a combination of things, really.
There's a lot there to unpack, and I'm really curious about the Sandhurst experience and what led you to pursue that?
Wow. I don't know. I really loved sport at uni, and I knew I wanted to work in sport. I did a biology degree, and I thought, I know what I'll do. I'll be a sports physio, because I knew I wanted to work in sport. I really like working with highly motivated people. So I thought I'd do a sports physio degree, and then I thought, well, it's really hard to get into working for a rugby team or a sports team. I'll go into the army and be a physio, and that will be my way in. And then I started looking at the army, and I was like, actually, being in the army ticks all the boxes. It's working with highly motivated people. It's in like a really dynamic environment. It's really pushing yourself, putting yourself outside your comfort zone, all those things I wanted and I enjoyed about sport and why I wanted to work in sport. I was getting through that. So I did that. And also I think part of my personality is that it was the hardest thing I could have done at that time. So I did it.
And they also play rugby in the army. So for that, it was how did you end up in teaching then? Because they're very different trajectories, aren't they?
Well, yes and no. But how did I got injured. So I never commissioned from Sandhurst. I trained at Sandhurst and spent quite a bit of time there. And then I prolapsed 2 discs in my lumbar spine. So that was game over quite quickly. So I had to have a very quick rethink. And teaching was not my first choice at all, but there was a shortage of science teachers. And frankly, a PGC seemed quite easy, really, after being at Sandhurst. I couldn't walk all that well at that time either. So I had this opportunity. It wasn't going to cost me any money. I really was against it. I really didn't want to do it. And my mum just said to me, education is never a waste. Just go and do the course. And then I'm on, and I thought I'll do it for a gap year. I'll do a gap year while I'm thinking about what I'm going to do. And I'm on like gap 15, gap 18 now.
I'm gonna view mine as that. Then I think I'm on gap 19.
I'm on gap. Yeah.
So I'm super interested in this, and I was very, very excited to speak to you about it because my eldest daughter is 11, and she's in year 6. She's going to be transitioning to year 7, and I'm obviously attending these meetings, and it's at the school I work at as well. So I've got double invested interest in this way because I like to have these discussions with her, and it's the occasional threat of, hey, I could teach you. But maybe she looks forward to that. So I am really interested in learning more about how the brain changes in this and the types of development, because as a good parent and maybe even as an educator, I want to be able to support her as best as possible because, even from understanding it in generally, I think would be really important. And then from a male to a female, there's always differences as well. And I think that is also very important. So can you help explain to us, and then people listening and watching as well, like just some of the developments that occur in the teenage brain during this period?
Yeah. Okay. So I always like to go back to a primitive human and look at evolutionary biology, because that's where we came from. That's where our brains and our behaviors have evolved from. So humans are social animals, and we live in family groups, extended family or larger groups. And when a human becomes reproductively active at puberty, it becomes really important for the evolution of the species that human then leaves their family group and finds another group, right? Because we don't want inbreeding, we want outbreeding. So alongside these physical changes during puberty, which center around reproductive biology, if you like, we also have this huge change in social learning. Because if a human leaves their group, again, a primitive human, they are incredibly vulnerable. The human on their own is not going to survive. We're group animals. So it becomes incredibly important to an adolescent human to find another group and be accepted by them. They also need to learn very quickly about the world around them, who they are and how they fit into it, and they need to find their people. And it has, for a primitive human, life and death importance to be accepted by a group. So we still have that. A modern adolescent still has that, this explosion in social learning, being able to look at another person who you don't know and learn something from the subtleties of their behavior, their expression, their speech, and also this need to be accepted and to fit in. That's where that comes from. So there's lots of things going on, but most of them center around social behavior and also learning very, very quickly about the world around them. So they have this amazing capacity to learn certain things.
And I'm interested in this because as a biologist as well, like we talk when we get to teach, obviously, and you would have done it in terms of evolution, and we talk about the prefrontal cortex, that part of the brain. We see that from early stages, mammalian, like the Homo sapiens, and before then the I can't speak today. What's going on? But the forehead, the angle of the forehead starts to change.
The frontal lobe. Yeah.
There we go. That's what I'm interested. How is that relevant, and how does that change for teenagers?
Well, firstly, it's uniquely human in this, isn't it? This huge frontal lobe. And this prefrontal cortex is where the executive functions live, and where we are able to deduce and reason and control impulse and things like that, calculate things, make judgments, and direct our attention. And all of those things are developing through adolescence, just as they do through childhood. They may be slightly quicker through adolescence, but actually the more important thing in an adolescent is the limbic system and the development of emotional regulation and the intensity of emotion in teenagers. And that is more the driving force. And what is interesting is that any human is not able to use their prefrontal cortex unless they're, one, safe, and two, in an emotional state where they're calm. And if you're not either of those things, the prefrontal cortex might as well not be there. You're not able to access those functions. For adolescents, it's the emotional brain, if you like, or the limbic system that is more often than not directing behavior. And then things are changing slightly as well with, I think, more anxiety in young people. And that's another brain function. And that's to do with safety and feeling safe and the fight, flight, freeze response. So prefrontal cortex, really, really important in learning, and really, and in a really positive learning environment, it can come on in leaps and bounds, but they've got to be able to use the prefrontal cortex, and that is often the challenge.
Yeah, it's the kind of couple of things that resonated with me when you were talking then. One, Inside Out 2. If you've seen my children watched it, we watched it several times with them, and their favorite is like anxiety, and then the different characters in it. It's so useful, like hearing you talk then, it's like you can relay that to the characters. There's learning there for them to be done. But the second part that resonates with me is I was a big rugby player, coach, fan, still am a fan. But one of the books that a boy gave to me, so one of the schools I worked at was a big rugby school, and we're going back now probably almost 15-ish years, and he was talking about the chimp paradox at the time, the book The Chimp Paradox. And when you talk about the limbic system, all those different parts, the emotional part, the chimp, the emotion as it were, it just made me think when you were talking about how emotion is so much quicker and how it rules our cognitive, like our decision-making processes. And I see that so often in my children who are coming into that part. And it's fascinating. How do we go about then, just out of curiosity, then, how do you support that emotional development? How do you ensure then that students can be centered, so emotionally feel at ease, so that learning can take place?
It's really difficult because they're meant to be emotional. And I think this is really common in adolescence. Historically, we've treated adolescent young people as overreacting, being overly emotional and being irrational and unreasonable, and they're not. They're meant to be like that. It's the quickest way their brains have to learn about the world around them, and they need to learn about the world around them really quickly. So I actually don't think it's helpful to downplay emotion. They're meant to feel something. Aside from that, they need to feel safe, and that's physical safety, but actually because social safety is really, really important to a teenager. So this idea of being accepted by a group or peers or by a person who isn't your immediate family member is such a huge driving force that actually it's really unique to the adolescent period of brain development. But social pain in an adolescent is processed by the same part of the brain as physical pain. And if you or I felt under threat of physical pain, we would not be concentrating on maths or science or French. And if you put a young person in a classroom where they might experience social rejection or social pain, they are not feeling safe. They don't feel safe. So things like calling, when I learned that, I was like, oh my goodness, I've got to stop picking on kids in class. When you think someone's not listening, so you go, you tell me what the answer is, and then they freeze. and they look around and you think, actually, I've done that so many times early in my teaching career. I thought, ha, caught you out. You weren't listening. But in fact, I realize now I was putting them into a fight, flight, or freeze response. That's not safe. That's miles away from the prefrontal cortex. It's not effective for learning. So it's changing our idea in the classroom of what is safety for a teenager, and safety is ensuring social acceptance in a classroom, and that is very difficult to do with
I was about to
teenagers.
say that is, I'm wrapping my head around it and going, because the next question would be, well, how do we do that? And I'm sure if you probably say to me, hey, if I had the answer for that, I'd be a millionaire.
No. And also it's important that they do experience social pain in a controlled way, and in a low stakes environment. So social pain in front of 2 or 3 friends is really low stakes, because that's how they learn. Oh, this was deeply embarrassing. I'm never going to do that again. Or I said this, or I used this turn of voice, or I communicated in this way and I got a look. And because we know that feelings are really, really important. And in fact, the hippocampus is very sensitive during the adolescent years. So memory of emotion is incredibly strong. So if they say something wrong in front of 2 friends and then their friends look at them funny, they'll remember that and they'll not do it again. So they do need to experience it. They need to experience that social pain or rejection, but we don't have to force it on them in a classroom environment. And I think there's something to be said for teaching young people about this. And if I know now this, and it's informed how I behave in a classroom, young people are clever. They can understand a lot about each other. They're really empathetic. If we teach them this, they will be more mindful of that in a classroom environment and be more inclusive. So I think being explicit about these things to young people is also really valuable.
It's so interesting to hear you say that. I had the pleasure of speaking with Ed Kerwin for Empathy Week and Empathy Studios about a very, very similar thing. And I always thought of it in terms of empathy as just, and most people probably do, in terms of just a small emotional or a side. And it's like, well, there's so much more to it in terms of compassionate empathy and cognitive empathy, as well as the emotional empathy. But you've really just, for me, it's in terms of eye-opening the significance and importance of trying and teaching students how to gain different perspectives and how to try and see it through other people's eyes, understand how they feel, so that, because they are going to find themselves in those places and it's okay, and as you say, not to force it upon them. And it almost brings into this concept of cold calling. We get told a lot about cold calling, and I've seen videos of it almost militant in terms of that. And I'm sure in a classroom where it's like everyone is expected to, it can work. But you do have those students, and I can think of it right now. I've got students in my classroom where I'm like, it just wouldn't work with them. Like that small one-to-one conversation is much better than a whole classroom thing.
I think if you're going to, if you're going to challenge them in that way and ask them something they don't know the answer to, the best way to do that effectively is to lower the stakes.
Yeah.
So can you do that one-to-one? Can you do it in a small group and go around the room and ask individuals where only them and the 2 or 3 people sitting around them might hear?
Yeah.
So I don't think we should wrap teenagers in cotton wool and not allow them to experience everyday social interactions. In fact, they must have them. It's vitally important to their learning. But can we lower the stakes? And the other way of doing that, of course, is distancing, which I'll talk a bit more about. Okay, so this is really really relevant to the PSHE that I think we're going to go on to talk about. But so it seems really simple, but it's quite effective. So if I say, you're in a group of people and they all want you to take drugs because they're taking drugs, what are you going to do? What are you going to say to them? I'm asking that young person to tell a whole classroom what they think and what they would do. And that's potentially quite threatening socially for them. They could experience social pain, rejection. If I said, here's a group of people and name them and say, this is what their situation is, this is what this person is saying to that person, write a script of how their conversation might go. They're not putting themselves at risk then. They're saying, this is what I think that person would say. It's not necessarily what I would say. So little techniques like that, distancing it so you are not putting that young person in that position to say what they think they would do. And it's really important for lots of other reasons, especially in PSHE, because you're talking about some sometimes very challenging topics. But it could be used in any situation. If you're talking in English, this is what this character has done. Is that what you would do? You could just change that question to, is that what someone your age would do?
Yeah.
And then they're not, they've got that get out of jail free card and say, well, it's not what I would do, but it's what I think somebody in that situation might do. And it lowers the stakes. Doesn't remove the social threat necessarily, but it massively lowers the stakes and makes it easier for them to work through those thought processes.
Yeah, and what you've got there, I'm perceiving this as, is a combination of combining social and emotional learning with almost pedagogical approaches.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
It's interesting because teaching wise, like we're scientists, we talk about science a lot.
Yeah.
And therefore, if we're lucky, we might cross silos and maybe go, well, we'll bring some geography in occasionally, and we'll bring a bit of history in occasionally, but we don't. And actually, from an educational point of view, we might be better if we can kind of go, what if we took the same approach to how we train teachers, and instead of just doing it as a, hey, this is pedagogy, and hey, this is technology, and hey, this is well-being, we looked at it and go, well, actually, you can cross pedagogy and technology. We talk about pedtech all the time. You can cross pedagogy and well-being. We'll come up with a name for that. I'm sure someone will at some point. Because I'm interested in moving on to this then. Obviously, we've got the pedagogy side. It's really focusing on initiatives of well-being and seeing where they branch into this. In terms of, from your experience and for the work that you do, what are the types of initiatives that you've seen around schools that are being really, really effectively deployed and utilized?
It's difficult because I think there's still, we've got a really long way to come with it, in that I don't think enough of this sort of understanding about the uniqueness and the unique challenge of the teenage brain is not really at the forefront of secondary education, or certainly not at the forefront of educating secondary teachers in initial teacher training. So touching a little bit on what you were saying before, in that secondary teachers are taught to teach a subject, and I think they should be taught to teach a person.
That's great.
And we're not, are we? I did a science PGCE, and it was all about, how do I get that person to understand this, to tick this list that they've got to understand. And it shouldn't be about that, I don't think. I think it should be more about teaching people. And I think primary is probably more like that. That primary teachers are taught to teach children because they're not as subject specific. Sorry, I've forgotten your original question now. Oh, where do schools do really well with wellbeing? So, the gold standard, I think, is where it's a whole school approach. And actually, what I mean when I say a whole school approach, I mean a whole staff approach. Okay. And all members of staff are on board with it, and that wellbeing is the foundation, and it's not something that you do on Friday afternoon in tutor time. It's something that happens on Monday morning, and it sets up the week, and it underpins the way the school runs. But actually going further than that, there's lots that we can teach young people about diet and exercise and sleep and sex ed and relationships and health. And there's lots we can teach them. But what we need to do is teach wellbeing skills, because what we want them to do with all that information that we're giving them is to use it to make the best decision for them at that point in their life. Yep. And that's a skill, right? So when I'm creating resources and writing programs and thinking about and helping schools with well-being, there are 3 things that I try and underpin everything with. The first one is self-worth, because I am not going to eat well and choose a healthy lifestyle choice and with food and exercise if I don't think I'm worth looking after. I'm not going to reject damaging behavior in a relationship if I don't believe that I'm worthy of love and care and affection. So self-worth is, I think, really a silver bullet when it comes to decision making about your own well-being, because you've got to really deeply believe you're worth looking after to make the right decisions. So developing self-worth is the first thing. The second one, and I sort of touched on this right at the beginning, is happiness and how important that is in well-being, of course, but in education across the board. And then thirdly, resilience, because no one's happy all the time. That's not possible, and it's not normal.
Yeah.
So we've got to build resilience into it. So there's lots of different things we can teach in well-being at PSHE. And that will be different in different countries and different settings and different age groups. But ultimately, it's got to be underpinned by those 3 things. Otherwise, it's not going to be effective for that young person. We want the young people to use that information to make the best decisions for them and to know when that decision needs to change because they've changed.
So I'm curious from this one now, because it's things that I'm passionate about. I'm passionate and interested in curriculum design.
Yeah.
And I get the benefit of speaking to wonderful educators and thought leaders like yourself with the podcast. And I always tend to go, right, can I take parts of what I've learned from you and embed it into my curriculum from year 7, maybe into year 13 that I teach? And so because we're kindred in biology here, is there a way, do you think, that instead of just making it a standalone thing like it's in PSHE or it's in tutor times, like we said, let's pick a lesson biology-wise. It might just be cells, year 7 cells. That's the first thing that springs to mind. Can we build in these components that you're talking about? Could we build it into an everyday lesson?
Yeah. Yes, definitely. And I think you can make certain things a school culture that really makes a difference. And if we look at self-worth specifically, my belief is that self-worth starts with self-awareness. And young people often are really not self-aware, especially those that use social media, and we'll get onto that a bit later. But self-awareness is really important. And in an academic environment, we quite often try to get them to be more self-aware about what do you find hard? What did you do well in that test? What did you do badly in? How did your revision work? What do you think you need to do more of? What do you think you need to do less of? We get them to be aware of we try to get them to be aware of what they need academically. We also need to get them to be aware of who they are personally and what they think about anything and what they feel about anything. So building in the questioning where they have to think about what they think, and it might be to do with the subject, it might be to do with an argument they've had, it might be to do with something they've seen online, it could be anything. But this is like one of the things I quite often try to get myself to remember is the phrase that if I'm shown that it is worth taking time considering my thoughts and feelings, I will start to believe that my thoughts and feelings have worth. So, and it's so hard in an academic environment because you've got to tick off all these spec points and you've got to get to this point in the syllabus by this point in the term, and then you've got to assess it and you've got to write a report and you've got to do all those things. I don't have time in the lesson to go sit and think about what you think about it. So, and also they're then sitting there going, oh, I don't know what I think. And then you're wasting time, and then there's disruption because you've given all this sort of empty space. But they do need empty space. There's ways we can build it in, and there are structured ways that we can get them to really nail down what they think about something and what they feel about something. So it's building that into a lesson, and any lesson. It doesn't have to be, what do you think about yourself? It's, what do you think about this? Can you verbalize? Can you put into words the thoughts that are happening in your head? And can we make sure that our behavior towards young people makes them understand that their thoughts have worth?
Yeah. And I think that's quite easily done
Yeah.
in terms
I
of
do
giving
think.
students thinking time. There's one, like we often, and that's been around for a long time, hasn't it? Where people go, you ask a question, no one likes silence. Teachers hate silence.
Yeah.
But actually you need to feel that, just be in be in the moment, just let it be, and then go. It's that pausing part. You can do that quite easily. It's all the other things that come with it then, meeting and greeting at the door, having those conversations. It's numerous different things about thinking about anything. But yeah, I want to transition though, because you mentioned self-worth a lot.
Yeah.
And you alluded to obviously the social media part that I want to come on to, because
Yeah.
obviously developing self-worth and students having that in a classroom is one thing, but with just the pure amount of social media that students have, like what's your kind of viewpoint on that in terms of how schools should address, or should they be tackling it, or should it be something that's left at home? What are your thoughts and feelings regarding this?
I haven't made my mind up about really phones in schools, because as a teacher there's some great apps, aren't there? There's some times when actually I'd quite like them to get their phones out in the classroom to use them effectively, and there's some really great stuff. And we talk about ed tech all the time, but then we're telling them they can't have their tech. It doesn't make sense. But we have to also be really careful, because social media platforms are built for addiction.
Yep.
And young people, I was talking about the limbic system earlier, and the importance of emotion. It's also, they're very sensitive to reward. So if you think social reward particularly, and because they feel that social reward so intensely, delayed gratification is really hard for a teenager, because that social reward lights up that limbic system so strongly that they want it, and they want it now. So getting them to moderate something that gives them social reward is so difficult for it, and we can't expect them to do it themselves. It's really hard. It's hard for some adults who don't have that almost limbic system in overdrive to moderate their online time. So asking a young person to do it themselves is just a ridiculously difficult thing for them to do. So moderating their time spent online, I think, is really, really important, helping them by putting boundaries in place. But probably the most problematic time spent online is not during school hours anyway. So I think it's got to come from home. But I think one of the big issues, and before you get into what they might be seeing online and how that's influencing their sense of self-worth, and how it's influencing their idea of what an aspirational relationship is, or dangerous stuff that they might be exposed to online, before you get into any of that, if we think back to when we were teenagers, we were angsty, emotional teenagers, right? We had to deal with it, didn't we? We had to sit in the car on the way home and deal with it and be moody. And that's a really important process, because we're processing emotions, and our emotions are the quickest way we have to learn about the world. And our brain is set up to learn about the world really quickly, so that we can find out where we want to be in it and how we fit in. So it's meant to happen. But what can quite often happen now is when you've got an addictive, highly engaging device in your pocket all the time, you don't have to process the emotion. I do it. If there's something I don't want to process, I distract myself.
Yeah.
And teenagers do that a lot if they've got access to that all of the time, so they don't have to process that emotion. And then I think you can end up in a spiral of, I don't know what I feel because I haven't thought about it. I have a lack of self-awareness, and that can quite easily run onto develop into a lack of self-worth. So it's not, I think what young people are viewing online is hugely important, and that's a whole other conversation. But just the process of having that highly engaging distraction available all the time is quite detrimental to a young person's sense of self-worth, identity, lots, because they're not processing emotion, and emotions are hugely important.
Yeah. You mentioned something earlier, obviously, in terms of courses, PSHE, which we want to come on and talk to about as well. But obviously, for different people listening from all around the world, can you just explain what PSHE is for them, please?
So it's different in an independent school and a state maintained school here. So PSHE, physical, social, health and economic education. In a maintained school in the UK, it's often still called PSHE, but its statutory is health education and RSE, relationships and sex education. Essentially, largely amounts to the same thing. In independent schools and international schools, there's a lot more freedom to add other things in, put lots of different things in, and obviously in some countries, some elements of sex education or relationships education might be challenging to teach. So I prefer the term well-being, because it doesn't contain it to your half hour, 1 hour, or your tutor time a week where we're teaching them these things. It's actually much broader. And like I was saying, there are things that we have to cover in terms of knowledge acquisition and for health education and RSE, but more importantly, it's the skills, and I think they should be underpinning education as a whole, rather than it being one lesson a week or fortnight or a drop down day at the end of term where we just go, okay, learn all this and then use it in your own life effectively, which, it's not possible for an adult, let alone a child.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I call it about embedding into the curriculum, or even the things that sit underneath the curriculum. And as you said there, that it is a broad range of topics. And I think back to when I was at school, or when the first 5 years of my teaching, 10 years of teaching, to where I'm at now. How can we, as educators and curriculum designers and people teaching this, how do we go about ensuring then that the PSHE, the well-being curriculum, is actually fit for purpose and relevant for today's teenagers?
We have to, I think, know what today's teenagers are experiencing. And I think, it's different for different people, but on the whole, people of my age and my generation have a huge digital blind spot, and we don't know really what they're doing online and what they're exposed to online. There is a lot of information out there, and more people are looking into this and gathering data on it. So it is possible to find out what young people broadly are experiencing online, and it is quite shocking when I talk to parent groups and I say, this is the percentage of young people who've seen this at this age, and this is what can happen without the parent having any knowledge of it. And it's not bad parenting, it's not negligent parenting, it's that we've got a blind spot. We don't know what is happening when they're looking at their device. So we have to educate ourselves, and it's changing quickly. And some of what happens online is dodgy. And young people instinctively know it's wrong and hide it. Not because they want to accept it, but because they know it's the price you pay for being on Instagram, or it's the price you pay for being on TikTok. And they don't want to have that taken away, because those platforms are built for addiction. And it's become a prerequisite for social acceptance, being on certain social media platforms for many, that they don't want to have their device taken away. So they hide a lot of the bad stuff that happens online from their parents, because they don't want to have it taken away. Not because they want to be exposed to that, but because they know their parents definitely don't want them to be. So it's having a greater awareness of what's happening, what young people are exposed to. And I think having really firm boundaries of when and how often they're allowed to use their devices, and what they have to share with us about using a device. It's a privilege to have one, and I don't know what it's like there, but we've got this it's gaining momentum here, the smartphone free childhood, where lots of primary school parents are getting together so that there's a platform and you can put in your primary school that your kids go to, and parents can sign up to say, I will not provide my child with a smartphone, so that it's a group effort, and it removes that the prerequisite for young people to have a smartphone to be socially accepted. And that's starting, and it's gaining momentum in primary schools. It will be really interesting to see what happens when those children who are 7, 8, 9 now get to secondary school, and whether their parents maintain that, and whether they those young people don't feel the social pressure to have the smartphone and are quite happy not to. I'll be interested to see where that goes.
It's a lot about, because I'm currently in that trap. I'm going to call it that, and a lot of it relates down to age appropriateness, which we want to talk about. But my 11-year-old has a Apple Watch, so she can call us. Now, there's a phone obviously that has to be tethered to it, but she has no access to it. But
that's a nice way of doing it. I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah. And my youngest, who is 9 and soon to be 10, is already, for my birthday, I want a phone. You know, everyone else in my year, she's in year 5, everyone else in my year 5, a phone. And in my head, I'm like, I don't care if everyone else has a phone. It's like, you work, you go to school where I work, you don't need one. Like, that's my response. I mean, it shows her naivety a little bit here, because she's like, I also want a credit card for my birthday, because soon I'll be going out. Soon I'll be going out with my friends, and you won't be with us. And that's kind of the bubble of Dubai. It's very safe, and my 12-year-old at some point will be off in the mall, and I'll be in a coffee shop around, and I can track her and see. And that's a different story. But there's an age appropriateness there for me in terms of what age will and do, because again, similar generation. I didn't get a phone until I was 17 when I started to drive, and it was like the Nokia, where the only thing you had on it was like the snake. And I think, you know what? I'm going to say, if you're listening to this, Nokia, but bring those back. Bring back starter phones where all you can do is send crappy text messages potentially and phone someone, because
and no images. No images.
You know, the black and white screen, bring it back.
You know,
yeah,
I think that is happening a little bit here. I think Eton have done that. Eton have said, I think it was this year that's just gone, that they said no smartphones. You're allowed a Nokia 3210 or whatever it was, you know, an old phone.
A burner phone.
Yeah, a burner phone. But no, that's they have them. They have actual burner phones now. A lot of kids in boarding school that they'll hand in their phone to their house mistress, and then they have their other one.
I've seen that see it here as well.
Happens
kids
a lot.
With 2 phones.
But yeah, I think Eton did that this year for the youngest, the new entrants. So I think that might happen, and that might come back and have a and also more teenage smartphones where they don't have access to any social media platforms, and they don't have access to platforms with unregulated free access commenting, and the general public being able to get in touch with or
what we're seeing in schools. There's a school in Dubai, Jess, Jumeirah English speaking school, wonderful school. And 2 of the guys, the SLT, spoke recently, and they've been doing this for a while, but at Guess, and they've got the pouches. I can't remember what the company
begins with Y, doesn't it? Yoto or something.
Yodo,
something like that. But they're
actually
good. I think they're a good idea. Yeah,
using those in schools, and there's a lot more schools now who are taking that on, where the kids put them in. End of the day. And I remember seeing even a further part of that. It must have been a research study that came up again on, I'm going to say this, came up on my social media feed. How about this?
Yeah.
But it was the kids putting their phones in a school into a clear perspex box, and obviously not having them for a period of time.
Oh, that was a Channel 4 documentary, wasn't it?
Yeah, I only saw snippets of it. I need to go and watch it all. But just the impact of it on the kids after all. But you're right. It's for all this innovation and technology, we are dehumanizing ourselves to some extent. Even with AI, it's you know, you speak. Go on,
that said, Sorry. That said, these young people are going to live in a world where social media is massively important to their jobs, their careers. So just removing it is also not the answer.
No.
But that and that I think it should be a part of really effective modern PSHE education, is understanding what an algorithm is, how your view of the world is manipulated by what you see online and what you're presented with online, that you're not necessarily in the control of that. And helping young people to understand that, because they, you can't just remove it from them completely, get to 18 and now open the floodgates. We've got to teach them to engage with these platforms effectively, safely, and to enhance their lives. And I think at the moment, I think we're getting towards a tipping point, actually. But I think up until now, and it's sort of like, oh, that's something on your phone that that you can play with, but it's a lot more impactful than that, and a lot more important than that.
So much more to it now. Like, I speak with my children in class, and there's a statistic that I think it's probably even more now, but over 3 billion people consume their news through social media. And we're kind of very much, and I find myself in this a little bit, of an echo chamber when we think about education. At the moment, education is AI. Like, it's that we're kind of forgetting about these underpinning parts that are really important. If you speak to, and it's weird because you've got two sides of this, speak to the developers and they'll be like, we need human flourishing. AI is there to be an assistant to help with human flourishing and connection. And it almost seems like a contradictory, but that's what they're about. And on the other side of it, you've got a high focus on AI literacy, and because it is going to be important. I don't think it's there yet, but it is going to be. And it's the same with what we're saying in terms of, actually, you can quite happily bring in those things, because we're concerned about deep fakes. You should be concerned about any picture you put online, because I can take it and take it to another website, and all of a sudden I'm like those kids in America or across Europe, because they're 13, 14-year-olds releasing deep fake naked photos of girls at their school. So there's potential. It sounds terrible, but there is potential to learn from these things, to improve the curriculum, improve what we give students that's relevant to them at this moment in time for what they're going to need in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And that should be fundamental, I think, to a really effective wellbeing program. And it is difficult because we have this blind spot, because we have not grown up with it. And it's, at worst for me, social media is a distraction from what I should be doing.
Yeah.
At worst for a teenager, it's deeply damaging.
You would say, and they would say, this is life or death. It's how they view it, isn't it? And that goes, I think everything we've just discussed there actually goes some way to answering the question, was, as a crisis, as a tipping point you mentioned, are we deprioritizing the value and worth of PSHE and what it brings to the holistic development, to the overall development of students in our education system?
Modern PSHE, I think, is very different to what the idea of what PSHE was historically, which is sex ed, how to have a healthy diet, how to sleep well, and quite old-fashioned, I suppose, and not that impactful or relevant, and sometimes a bit preachy. But so PSHE, in that sense, I can see why it's not valued highly by either teachers or students. But modern wellbeing education, I think, is very, very different, and it should be first thing on a Monday morning. It should be what underpins secondary education. That's very difficult to do, I think. Change the way we educate teenagers. Very difficult.
And that starts with what I'm going to bring into this next question, is about teacher training. Because again, you see generational differences about how certain teachers are trained, or almost even where they were trained, will have an effect on what they deliver and how they deliver it. And there's teachers out there who are not specialist PSHE teachers. Like we said, if it's a secondary school.
Most aren't they?
No, I'm science. So it's like, oh, well, you're a biologist, you can come and talk about this. I'm like, what? My wife has even said that with my daughter. She's like, well, you teach about menstrual cycle. And so when she goes, and it's like, what? There's an assumption. There's that assumption, isn't there? It's like,
Yeah.
what support and training do you think is going to be effective for teachers to develop this role?
I think it needs to be a really important part of initial teacher training. And I think we need to sort of get away from, as I said earlier, teaching the subject and instead teaching the child, teaching the young person. So that's really important. I think it really needs to be, CPD is really important because the things that impact teenage well-being and mental health are changing really quickly, and there's no way we can keep up with that and keep up with the changes in our subject and in other areas of our responsibility. And I think a lot of teachers feel that, hang on, this isn't fair. I'm already responsible for so much. You can't also make me responsible for their mental health. I'm not a mental health professional. So that's really difficult to keep teachers up to speed with what they need to do to support positive mental health. So CPD is really, really important. But the problem is it's expensive for schools. It's not, in a maintained school in the UK, something that is part of what the government provides teachers. Yet often the government expects teachers to solve a lot of societal problems at school. But, I ask regularly when I'm doing CPD in schools, I ask the staff body to raise their hand if they had anything with relating to PSHE in their PGCEs or whatever teacher qualification they did. And I get one or two at best. Even now, those that do have, teachers, young teachers, early career teachers that are just coming through, if they have had it as part of their course, it was an afternoon or at best a day. But it needs to underpin the way that we behave in the classroom, I think, irrespective of the subject we teach. Also, we have to recognise it's incredibly difficult to do effective PSHE education from the perspective of safety of the young people and of the staff members. It's often given to staff members. You're a tutor, so you're doing the PSHE. One of the statutory outcomes, I'm thinking of one particular one in the UK, which is you've got to teach them about, I can't remember what constitutes sexual violence, honour-based violence, rape, FGM, domestic abuse. That's incredibly difficult to do, especially when you think 1 in 20 young people have first-hand experience of domestic abuse.
I'm just thinking,
How do you do that if you're a maths teacher and you're not a specialist PSHE teacher who's had extensive training and lots of resource and help with delivering that? That's really difficult and scary. What if you're a teacher and you have gone through that yourself and now you've got to stand in front of a class and be asked difficult questions to answer? You've got to talk about IVF and menopause and fertility and cancer. And all of these things are part of the PSHE syllabus in many places. That's not just sometimes unsafe for the young person. And that's why, I mentioned distancing earlier, why that becomes fundamentally important in some PSHE lessons. But that's really difficult for some teachers as well. I personally had to answer a question, and I don't mind the girl asking me the question, and it was an important question. But it was in a biology lesson and she asked me about miscarriage. Why does a miscarriage happen? I was having a miscarriage at the time. And I had to say, I don't know. And all that was inside me was, I wish I knew. I wish I knew. And how often are we doing that to teachers in PSHE? All the time, probably. So it needs to be really safe for teachers to be able to say, I can't teach this to this class. I can't answer these questions today or at the moment. So it's hard enough to organise your scheme of work, but we also have to take into account that we have to give flexibility to teachers with it, because those are important questions for those young people and they deserve to have them answered by someone who's really well equipped to answer them. So it is very difficult, very difficult.
The $1 million question then is, how do we go about doing that? Is it a training sense for schools to give teachers? How do we go about supporting them? so that we can have that. Because you're right, everything you say there about teachers' well-being and student well-being is they're on a par. But you know,
So I mean, the pie in the sky, the gold standard, what would be brilliant is if we could throw money at the problem and teachers could all be really extensively trained in delivering this, and that we recruit people into the profession who care deeply about it. That's the gold standard, right? But realistically, that isn't going to happen, because it's not why many people become teachers. And many people become teachers because they love their subject, or there's other things that attract them to profession, which are all, of course, valid and important. And also there's just not the money to throw at it. So I've thought a lot about this, is that how can I make it really easy for a school to deliver really high quality wellbeing? And I think this is where we can use technology and we can use AI. So a lot of schools follow a specific scheme of work so that they can be sure that they've met certain outcomes by the end of year 8, year 9, year 10, whatever, year 11, whatever. And rather than reinvent the wheel every year, because that's really difficult then to keep track of who's covered what and when, you just follow the same program year on year, right? Because it makes sense. Admin wise, it makes sense. What if we removed all the admin? So my husband's a web developer. I'm working on a system at the moment where you have a calendar and you think, what do these kids need? Drag and drop the lesson. And I've written all of the lessons. Drag and drop it in, put it in your calendar, teach the lesson, and it automatically takes care of what statutory outcome has been met. I can export it to Excel, give it to an inspector. This is when we covered this. What if we just got rid of all the admin and we just said, what do these kids need now? Let's teach them that, and get a computer to do the rest, because computers can do all that. Why are we sitting as teachers in front of spreadsheets? It's a waste of our time. We don't need to do that. Something else can, we can use technology to do that.
Yeah. Like we said about, when I said to you there about AI developers wanting human flourishing, I think that's what they mean by it. Like if we can utilize, and there's the thing going around, it's been going around for a while, isn't it? About, I don't want AI to take my writing and art so I can do more ironing and stuff. I want AI to do the ironing for me so I can
exactly right. Yeah.
And it's the same principle, isn't it? In terms of what you're just saying, I want technology to be able to do the admin side of things that allows me to form connections with students and teach students.
Absolutely, yeah. And what teenagers need, their brains are designed to be really, really susceptible and really need that human to human contact. That's what we need as teachers to be able to provide, is really high quality human to human contact in a classroom. And how many times do I walk into a classroom not feeling capable of giving the best human to human contact that I can, because I have got so much else to do that's admin.
Yeah.
I did not become a teacher to do the admin. And yet, how much of my time do I spend doing that?
Yeah. Same in meeting. I'm going to say it, I will say it, meetings.
Yeah.
There's going to be teachers out there, and I'm on both sides of it. There's a relevance in terms of sometimes they're needed. I need to talk to you. I want to be able to talk with my staff. I want to see where you're at. And so, but I've sent you an agenda. You're going to know what this is about. And then sometimes when it's like, even PD can feel like a meeting, because it's a designated time. You turn up and then you leave going, what have I taken from that? Really? What have I taken from that 45, 50 minutes of my time? And that, if you can remove those things, or train teachers.
I mean, I remember years ago now, I was sat in the kitchen one evening making on PowerPoint a flow diagram for respiration. And my husband was in and out of the kitchen doing his normal evening, whatever he was up to. And I was doing it for quite a long time, and quite a few times he walked past me and I was still doing it. And he just laughed and he was like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
That should take minutes. You've been doing that for hours, and frankly, it looks terrible. And it did. So we don't need to do that. We just don't need to do it. But we do need to meet young people on a human level. We need to. It's fundamentally important. Yeah.
So, whilst we're talking about technology and opportunities to bring these things into play, like obviously you've mentioned something there. We can, we can throw some ideas out later for it. But are there any companies out there that are doing sort of the standard at the moment, good PSHE resources or anything like that that teachers can go and look at, or schools could go and look at?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are various companies there where you could go and access or download lesson plans and resources, and that's great. I think there's other really use, and I mean, I'm sure that has value. It cuts back on lesson planning time. It gives you information that you might not already have, as because you're not a subject specialist. You might not know what contraceptives are most effective and what the side effects are, for example, and that can give you that. And I think there's value in that. There's some other things that are really good that use technology. There's for really specific subject areas. Have you come across lifesaver.org?
No.
It's really good. It's from the British Heart Foundation, and it's a simulation of doing first aid and CPR. And you can choose different age groups. So if you choose the teenagers, and it talks you through what to do it. You can even do it with VR headset, and it can be really immersive. So there's great things. There are great things like that for simulating situations that we could never replicate, because for example, CPR, we're not going to replicate that in a classroom. Those are really good. There's also other really good resources online for parents and for schools to use when we're considering, what I talked about earlier about self-awareness and understanding and considering your thoughts and feelings and making space for that. There are loads of really good websites and apps for that now. Smiling Mind is really good. The Mindfulness in Schools project, that's had a lot of press in the UK recently. UCLA Mindful have an app. The Healthy Minds program. There's also lots of really good information for young people on specific areas, like Brook is a sexual health charity, Copperfield on cancer care and advocating for your own health, and Young Minds, Childline. All of those things have got really, really good, really up-to-date and helpful knowledge for young people. But actually, we need to focus more, I think, on teacher wellbeing, so that teachers are in the best place to go into that classroom and really take care of themselves and the young people that they're in front of, and develop those interactions. That's, I think, where there is a big gap, where I don't see much for teachers, other than here's AI and it'll plan your lessons for you. Yeah, that's helpful, but I wouldn't ever rely on an AI. I've tried it. I've looked at some AI lesson plans, and they're not blowing me away. Yeah, you might remove a bit of work, but when you've been a teacher for a while anyway, you've got quite a good bank of resources, haven't you? It's not making a huge difference. Some marking AI is really good for some marking, but again, would I rely on it without checking it? No, because I know those students. I know what they were trying to say when they wrote this, and so I think there's a gap there, and there's more that we can use technology for to help teachers.
Yeah, and it's an interesting. I got asked this question yesterday about obviously the teacher shortage, the great teacher shortage it becomes known as now across the world. And one of the things people talk about is, is it to do with the salary? Is it if we gave them better salary? The reality is no. Don't get me wrong. I think anyone in any job would be like, of course I want to be paid more for what I do. It's just a commonality. But if it's like you're gonna pay me more money and I've still got to do the same amount of work. So in other words, I've not gained time. I've not say, well, what if? And this is an approach. One of the heads in Singapore. It's like our teachers have a 60% contact time. That's where they invested the money. There's more staff, so that staff have time to do those things that actually, if you ask them, where's the burnout, where's the pain points, it's in I don't have enough time to do X, Y, Z. Okay, invest money to give me more time.
Yeah.
I still want to be paid the same, by the way. I still want to be paid the same. But...
Yeah. And also, when I speak to teachers, a lot of them say mental health in young people is a problem. We have no idea what to do about it. And it's helping them to understand that, and to understand what is normal for a teenager, and how to deal with these very emotional, sometimes volatile young people, and not for it to feel like a failure because you haven't taught them simultaneous equations.
You could try teaching me that. I would have no idea.
It's not, I think we've got to help teachers really understand what success is for a teenager, and how to achieve it. And it's not like a small adult. You're not just teaching small adults. They're a very unique beast, an adolescent.
I agree. And that for me is one of the greatest challenges for teachers, is when you look at a timetable and go, so you're going to teach year 7, then you're going to go to year 12, and then you're going to go back to year 9, and then you're going to go to year 11, and you get a bit of a break. It's like you're teaching across a threshold of emotions and development stages and needs and stress. I'm head of sixth form, and I look at my Komodo. We use Komodo and check-ins. And a lot of my students at this time of year, when I look at it in terms of where it is, it's stress.
Yeah.
Stress because of it's because of exams, it's because of predicted grades, it's all these different things. And you think, and part of you goes, okay, well, that's normal because of where we're at and the importance of what we're doing. Stress is inevitable.
Yeah.
But then,
and not always bad. The
other part, as you mentioned earlier, is, have I taught you how to cope with it? Have I given you the opportunities to learn how to deal with it and speak out about it and to manage it and know what to that for me is the most important part. And that's the part I think sometimes we get wrong, because we're like too busy doing X, Y, Z, too busy. We've got to get this curriculum time, and you've got to do this. You need to have that. And it's like, well, hang on a minute. Are we providing these lessons or timetabled or non-negotiable periods within their weekly calendar that gives them opportunities to develop life skills that will allow them to be a functioning member of society in so many years? And I think, like you say, get that right for staff as well, get that right for students, and it reduces the anxiety within a school network.
Absolutely.
So but anyway, I want to move this on. We've got a quick fire round. I've been bringing it to most people, and you've obviously looked at yours as well, which is good. You can hear them like a newsreader, just turning the page.
Okay, I've got it. I made some notes.
Amazing. So, a book or research paper that has significantly influenced your approach to adolescent education.
Well, it's really hard to choose one. So I've got 3. So the first one is a paper by someone called Dahl, written in 2004, called Adolescent Brain Development, A Period of Vulnerabilities and Opportunities. That was from the Annals of New York Academy of Sciences. That's really enlightening. Another one, which is not related to teenagers, but really was really fundamental in my understanding and belief of happiness being fundamentally important to learning. And that is by Emmons and McCulloch, Counting Blessings versus Burdens, an experimental investigation of gratitude and subjective well-being in daily life. Very interesting. And then on for general reading for a teacher and actually a parent is this one. I talked about Bettina Honan earlier, and she's the lady who came in and did the insert, and this is a book she's written with somebody else, and this is brilliant. It's a really, really helpful book. It's really readable. It breaks down a lot of research, but it's also got really helpful bits in it, like almost like troubleshooting. My teenager's doing this. What do I do? Why are they doing it? And then there's exercises and things to do with your teenagers, which you could do in class or you can do as a parent. It's a really useful book.
That is The Incredible Teenage Brain.
The Incredible Teenage Brain. Yeah, really helpful.
3
recommend that to loads of people.
Great recommendations. Thank you ever so much for those. All right, if you could implement one policy change in education system regarding adolescent well-being, what would it be? Only one. I'm sure you've got lots, but if you pick one, what would it be?
Educating teachers, making it the fundamental, both in initial teacher training and teacher CPD, is understanding teenage well-being, their own well-being, and how to improve it.
think that is a great point.
Mm.
A common myth about teenage behavior would you like to debunk?
They're not overreacting.
I'm gonna have to remember that one. I'm gonna have to
They're
remember
not
that one.
overreacting. If they get side eye from a friend and it consumes them from the rest of the day, it's not an overreaction.
Yeah.
It's an important part of what they're trying to learn, which is how to fit in the world and with people. It's not an overreaction.
Also happens, I think, with siblings, as I've experienced today. We have this the game. My daughter, the eldest one, was like, and this is a very, and how bad's Dubai? So you remember when you were growing up, and it'd be like mini digs or beat or bash if you saw a certain car driving around.
Yeah.
Well, this is my daughter's game with her friends was punch Porsche. So every time you see a Porsche, which unfortunately is very common, you get a punch. And they also do like a yellow car thing. And we were driving back today, like the netball I told you about. And my youngest is in the back, and we're just about to pull into the driveway, and there's a yellow car, and she just slapped her on top of the head. And there'd been a little bit of back and forward in terms of, she just burst into tears. Not because she got hit hard or anything else like that. And you're instant as a maybe a bit of as a dad, you're just like in your head, in my head, I'm like, don't be silly. Why are you being so precious?
Don't be silly.
It's like, this is your game. Just because you're getting upset because someone's getting the better of you in your game. Yeah. It's like you're instant as an adult, and I'm very open, and I'm happy to talk about it.
I do it all the time. Don't be silly. You're being silly.
Yeah. Why are you being so precious? She's like, I'm not hurt. And it's the most challenging thing to stop yourself. To stop yourself, because that's your emotion reacting. It's not necessarily that I've thought about it. It's your emotion going, oh, just shut up. Like when actually you just need 5 seconds to be like, okay, is everything all right? Yeah. And we don't do it. It's so hard because we're all caught up in our own things. So
I think and it's so easy to invalidate somebody else's emotion. Because you don't think they should feel that way, and maybe you don't, and that's fine. But it's really important for young people's, I think, sense of self-worth to know that what they feel is valid, and it doesn't need to be valid to anybody else. It only needs to be valid to them.
Yeah. And that's, as I was trying to say to mine, it's like perception. The easiest way I view it is one man's trash is another man's treasure. It's like what you see is that I may not, but that's okay.
Exactly.
So
it's all right to feel like that.
Yeah. So wrapping that point,
it's all right to feel like that. Yeah.
It's a great point. That is a great point to debunk. I think definitely. And last one that we've got: how do you envisage the role of technology in supporting adolescent development over the next decade? I mean, I say 10 years. I think 18 months is going to be very different, isn't it? So
well, in education, it's definitely helping to manage workload for teachers so that they can be humans in a classroom more easily and with more energy. I don't know, but the development of internet safety laws, I think, is really important. I think politics, unfortunately, is going to have to play a huge role, and getting a better handle on what's happening online. So regulating, I think, technology, or certainly social media, it needs to happen, and I think could be really impactful. And integrating technology into the way we educate, not pedagogy, but teaching young people about how to make the best of technology in their lives, as opposed to it's a frivolous thing you can use if you want to. It's integrating it into the people they'll become.
Yeah, definitely. So they can work with it. Yeah, most definitely. That in itself is a big challenge, and I know all about that. But wrapping this up, Rachel, I'm really, really appreciative of your time today and sharing, these interesting stories and knowledge and just perspectives on ways we can and should be thinking about this and how we should be prioritizing it. Like I have taken a vast amount from this, and I'm going to try my best to speak to my daughter better, and all the students, not just mine, but all my students. And I found myself doing that a lot more, which is good. But for the listeners and for the viewers, what is the thing that you hope they can take away from our conversation today?
that young people are going to push away from us as adults or as parents, and often as teachers as well. But the way we behave around them and what we say to them, even if they look like they're disregarding it, it really matters, and they really care what we think. And very small, subtle changes in our behavior towards them can be deeply impactful. And even when it's really hard because you think they don't listen to a word you say and they just push you away and doing their own thing, they do care. And all of that good work you put into making them brilliant people before they became adolescent will still be there at the other end. And I've heard it called the teenage tunnel. And they come out the other end into these wonderful people.
Yeah. We have
And
these
everything you do matters, and it has an impact.
If you are working in a school, I know exactly what you're talking about, because end of year 8 into year 9, out of that tunnel by maybe end of year 10, beginning into year 11, and most definitely by the end of year 11, completely
Just
different.
think the people they become. It's amazing, isn't it?
Very much so. Very much so. Yeah, that is a great takeaway. I'm going to remember that one, the teenage tunnel. For anyone out there listening, watching, who is interested in learning more about you and the work you do and wants to find out more, where are the best places to find you?
I'm on LinkedIn. I'm not brilliant at engaging with social media. I don't love it, but I try. And then also my platform's called Eliza Education. And I think actually I'm going to, after this, give you a code so that your listeners can download some free resources from there if they want to.
Amazing. As we love freebies. Teachers love freebies.
And I'll try and find some lessons on there that specifically address some of what we've talked about today. So if it's something you want to try and teach your, the children in your school or use for your staff, then I'll let you have some links for that.
Thank you. I'm very appreciative of that. Thank you ever so much.
Welcome.
We will put all of those descriptions down below as well. So LinkedIn and that, people can find you. But other than that, Rachel, thank you ever so much for talking with us
You're
in
so
the
welcome.
Classroom podcast. It's really insightful, really, really insightful, and greatly appreciative of you sharing that wealth with us. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.